Hi guys, Mark here. Welcome. Today's project is going to be a Paracord hammock. This project is relatively easy and fast to do. It is safe and completely functional. You can use this project as the starting point for your own designs. Here we have a rough sketch of today's project. Our main mesh, or net-like pattern at the center, is going to be 6 feet 8 inches long. On each side, we have a wooden spreader bar, which is going to be about 35 inches in length. Each spreader bar is connected to a metal ring using a number of strands. The distance between the spreader bar and the metal ring is about a foot on each side. To make a couple of spreader bars, you can use square, round, or rectangular pieces of wood. In our case, our spreader bars are going to be about 35 inches in length. If you're using round dowel rods such as this one here, use one at least an inch in diameter. Since the spreader bars are not going to come under a lot of stress, you can use softwoods such as pine. Here is how I mark down the drilling locations onto a dowel rod. I grab a piece of thread slightly longer than my dowel rod. I pin the end of my thread onto the side of the dowel rod. I do the same thing on the other side. Getting a nice straight line. I'm going to mark down my first hole an inch away from the edge of the dowel rod. After that, I'm going to mark down an additional 11 spots, each 3 inches apart. So our first hole plus 11 more. So our last hole. Again, it's going to be an inch away from the edge. So this is where we're going to cut off our dowel rod so that both holes are an inch away from the edges. To begin making our hammock, we're going to grab a couple of metal rings. Get the strongest, thickest rings that you can find. Next, prepare a total of 6 strands of paracord. In our case, each out of the 6 strands is 30 feet long. To begin, we're going to attach our 6 strands of paracord onto one of the rings. Fold your first piece in half. Attach it onto the ring using a lark's head knot. Repeat 5 more times. So, all 6 strands attached onto our first ring. Next, I'm going to secure my ring to prevent it from moving. In my case, I'm simply going to tape down the ring onto the floor. We now thread our 12 ends through the 12 holes on the spreader bar. Remember that we want a distance of about a foot between the ring and the spreader bar. So this distance here is about a foot. From here on out, we're not going to be using the outer 2 ends. So these 2 ends, you can tape down, we're not going to be using them. They serve as the border for our hammock. The other 10 ends here, We're going to coil up to prevent tangling while we're working. To hold your coils together, you can use rubber bands. The main knot used to tie our hammock is a modified sheet band. It is tied like this. So, a band with both ends facing down. In our first row, we're going to be tying a total of 5 knots, using the 10 middle ends. So, the first row, a total of 5 knots, tied as close to the spreader bar as possible. Now for the second row, we take each of the ends on the sides, pass it around our side strands. So behind like this, and like this. Using the 8 remaining ends, we are going to tie a total of 4 knots. So in between are 5 knots in the first row. So the second row is complete, a total of 4 knots with the side strands passing under our other side strands. In the third row, we basically repeat our first row, so we're going to be tying a total of 5 knots here. So we start with the side strands, like this, so 1, 2, 3, 4, a total of 5 knots. So the third row is complete with a total of 5 knots. Now let's do one more row, the fourth row, which is done exactly the same as the second row. So we pass the 2 side strands under the other side strands here. So under and under. Then we use the 8 remaining ends to tie a total of 4 knots. So the fourth row. Do the exact same thing until you reach our desired length, which in our case is going to be 6 feet 8 inches. After reaching a desired length for my hammock, I'm going to attach my second spreader bar. Note that I have used all 10 of my inner ends in this row, so just like in my first row. In the next segment, we're going to be using the cow hitch. Here is how you do it. You have your ring, you have your end. You simply tie your end onto the ring like this. So a knot similar to the lark's head knot, but tied with one end. We now attach every other end onto our second ring using a cow's hitch. So I'm going to remove half of my ends, placing them out of the way. Then I'm going to attach my first end, one from the middle, onto the ring using a cow's hitch. Remember that the distance between the spreader bar and the ring should be about a foot. Attach the remaining ends, exactly the same way. So, a total of 6 cow hitches. In the next segment, we're going to be using the double sheet bend. So a single sheet bend, then do another turn. Like this, tighten up, and you are done. A secure bend, which we're going to use to connect our ends. We finish up by connecting the ends coming out of the cow hitches with the ends that we left out earlier. We're going to be using the double sheet bend. So this completes our hammock. A total of 6 double sheet bends. At this point, you have a variety of ways of securing the ends. You can simply trim them off and melt them. In my case, I'm going to do a double half hitch, then trim them off. Just to cover everything, here is how I finish after the double sheet bend. With each end, I do a couple of half hitches. So 1, 2, then with the other end, I trim off the ends, then melt them. To finally hang the hammock, I'm going to be using these straps made out of webbing. So guys, this concludes our tutorial on the Paracord hammock. I really tried to make every step in the making process as clear as possible. I hope that I succeeded. If you have any questions, post them in the comment section below, and from here on out, you can add your own modifications to the hammock. You can use different knots, different color combinations, a different width, length. You have a lot of options. Thank you for joining me, and see ya next time.